Hello. Good morning, Internet. I'm back doing the puppet building thing again. Just check the levels here. So we had some technical issues I discovered from last time after watching the playback. It's dropping a few frames there. And that was not happening because of internet lag or anything. That was actually local. That was on the local recording as well. So I've massaged OBS a little bit. Hopefully it will be better this time. Let me know. I am monitoring it over here, so hopefully we'll be okay. But wow, the response to the first stream was overwhelming. I'm still a bit stunned. So thank you. I think there's like one person here right now, but that's okay. Hello, whoever you are. Feel free to lurk. FYI, lurking is totally cool. Today, we are carrying on with building this charming little creature, the Smol, as you can see in the picture. The Smol that I'm building is actually going to be quite similar to this one. That's the first one I built. So this one's going to be green as well. Which green I haven't quite decided yet, but we'll decide that momentarily. FYI, I am going to be taking a quick break at 11. It is, of course, Remembrance Day. And in Canada, at least, I don't know if it's the same everywhere, but in Canada, we observe a moment of silence at 11 to remember those who died in war and to honor our veterans. And I'm going to be doing that at 11. It's a quick break, so I'm just going to be putting up like the, I'll be right back screen. But that won't happen until 11, so we'll see what we can get done up to that point. So, checking the bit rate. The bit rate looks good. Okay. I didn't sleep well last night, so I'm going to be a bit loopy today, thankfully. We have a beverage that hopefully will help with that. But we're going to take that off of the work surface. And let's see, maybe top down is better for this. So today, the plan is to build or to sew the skin. And we can talk a bit about what that actually is comprised of. So, next, let's go back to the face cam for a sec, because I'm just talking. Puppets are usually covered with some kind of fabric. That fabric is usually some form of fleece. It doesn't have to be. You can use anything to cover a puppet. And I've seen lots of really interesting puppets that have used like nylon, stocking nylon, that kind of fabric, a really sheer thing, and it makes a nice kind of interesting skin texture and all kinds of stuff. But for the kind of Muppet style puppets that I built, we usually use nylon fleece. Now, there is a whole thing around the legendary Antron fleece. The original Muppets, at least starting from like the 60s and the 70s, were made or were covered in this stuff called Antron fleece. There are urban legends around the qualities and existence of Antron fleece, and everyone calls the stuff that we have nowadays Antron fleece, despite the fact that Antron was a brand name, and they went out of production. And I think it was like copyrighted DuPont or something like that. I don't have my facts 100%, so I'm not like, don't quote me on this. By all means, Google it. But if you're really interested in the history of fleece, but anyway, the stuff that was called Antron fleece went out of production sometime in the 70s, I believe, and you couldn't get it anymore. It just literally didn't exist. And the interesting thing about Antron fleece was it was a single-sided fleece like what we have now, which is to say that there's a netting, and then the fleece are like fibers that get, sort of embedded in the netting, and it creates a very kind of soft, plushy quality. It's almost like really thin foam. But it's squishy. It has some depth to it. The Antron fleece was very dense and very thick. In fact, I think Curly Wilcox I think I hope I'm remembering that she was one of the principal builders at the Henson workshop. She had said that like that stuff could be up to a 1/4 inch thick. So like, early Kermits and stuff like that were made out of this stuff. And the nice part about it, and the reason that it was used over anything else, was because the thickness of the pile meant that you could sew a seam and have that seam be blended. So, the sticky epi fibers you could kind of weave them together out of the seam, and the seam would be practically invisible. Now, that gets into the whole subject of invisible seams and stitches. There's a whole thing around that too. There is a kind of urban legend around the so-called Henson stitch. We'll get into that once I actually start sewing, but there's a whole thing around that. I'll give you a spoiler. There's no such thing as the Henson stitch. But anyway, back to the fleece thing. So the stuff that was called Antron fleece that was used in the original Muppets went out of production, stopped being available. And in fact, stopped being available to everybody, including the Henson workshop. So that's why you've noticed sometime in like the 80s, I guess, Kermit underwent a visible color change. He became much brighter green. And that was partly because they couldn't get the original fleece that the Kermits before were made out of. So the stuff that they could get, this other nylon fleece, wasn't as thick. So sometimes they would use multiple layers to try and simulate the thickness of the old Antron fleece. But that's the stuff that we have nowadays. It's just nylon fleece. It isn't Antron fleece. And even that has recently undergone a rebranding from the company that owns it, which is Georgia Stage. And they now call it Nyla fleece. Like one word, Nyla fleece. So that's the stuff that most people use to cover their puppets in today. And that's what we're going to be using. The company that I get my Nyla fleece from is a well-known puppet supplier called Puppet Pelts. Shout out Lori and Cindy. And they offered their Nyla fleece in many, many colors. They hand dye a lot of the stuff themselves. I haven't yet gotten to the stage of dyeing myself. It's a bit intimidating. And the other thing is, of course, this fleece is quite high quality and is not, it's not majorly expensive, but it's expensive enough that you don't want to waste any. And I'm terrified that I'm just going to get some, big batch of nylon fleece and completely mess up the dyeing process, and that will be it. I can't use it. So I let Lori and Cindy do my dyeing for me. And so what that means, two of their most popular colors, or one of their most popular color, as far as I'm aware, is called Frog, for a reason. And I'll show you the reason. Let's see here. I should have prepared this ahead of time. Nope, that's not Frog, but we'll need this. I'm not sure I have any Frog handy. Oh, yes, I do. There we go. There we go. Okay. Oh, there is copyright. All right. That's one of the reasons why this color is called Frog and not something else beginning with a K. There is definitely copyright, and so we can talk about that if you want. So a lot of puppet makers will build Muppet replicas. I have worked on a Kermit myself. I've never finished a Kermit, but I have started the process of working on a Kermit, because who doesn't want a Kermit? You can find people who will sell you Muppet replicas. That's not legal. Just so you're aware, it is definitely a violation of copyright. It depends on kind of the condition of the sale. I don't know that anybody has ever been successfully prosecuted for it, but they've definitely received case stop doing that. There is one very popular and well-known Muppet replica builder who is a bit disreputable, shall we say. I'm not going to name names because I don't want to get in any legal trouble, but they have had to change the name of their company several times, partly because Disney has gone after them, and partly because they keep ripping people off and taking their money and not giving them their puppets. That's a bad thing. Anyway, so yes, it is in fact not legal to sell a replica Muppet. You can make one for yourself, and that's fine. No one's gonna, worry about that. But I can't like make a Kermit and then sell it, and I'm not going to. So that's a whole thing. So yes, actual Muppets are copyrighted. So I don't build them, at least not for sale. However, people build them, and when they do, they want to try and get accurate colors and things like that. So that's why our friends at Puppet Pelts have these colors of green fleece, and this one is called Frog. This one kind of replicates the color. My puppets are very similar in style. Where is the line drawn? So that's a good question. It's about specific designs, right? So it's like, so my Greeblies, for example. Let me grab one. Let's do this guy, because this is the most recent one. So you will notice, let me pull up base cam here. This is one of my models of puppets, and they're called Greeblies. We'll get into the why they're called Greeblies later. But you'll notice they have some very similar properties to Fraggles. Of course, everybody makes that comparison. And that's intentional. They very much, the design is inspired by Fraggles. I've never claimed anything otherwise. There's no question. They're actually more inspired by the Coosbane aliens. I don't know if you're a Muppet fan, you know who the Coosbane aliens are. But there's a lot of Coosbane in these guys. This is legal. This is just like inspired by. This is not a copy. This isn't Mowgli, Moki, or Gobo. It's not a specific character. This is just a design kind of inspired by something else. That's an iteration. That's perfectly fine. That's legal. No one's going to come after me for that. It's an homage, if you will. But if I were to make, like Gobo Fraggle, that's where the copyright kicks in. So I don't. So that's a good question, but there is a line, and sometimes you kind of have to go, is this too close to something? I'll give you another really good example. I don't have a easily available picture. I recently made a big furry monster that had a blink mechanism in it, and as I was building, I kind of realized that it was getting, hello, Jimmy. Jimmy, the cat has come to yell while I'm on the internet live. Thank you, Jimmy. I didn't start out with a design in mind. I just started building. Keep missing what camera to talk to. And I kind of realized as I was building, thanks, wanted to ask since I found you a couple days ago. Yeah, no problem. It's a very good question, and it is something to think about. And something to be aware of. So as I was saying, as I was building out this big furry monster, I realized he was looking an awful lot like an animal, and I didn't want that, obviously. So it was kind of a judgment call. It's like, how far should I go? Like, his construction is different than animal. Animal's actually built out of foam, and then he's got feathers punched into the foam. This was all fur. So it didn't look like animal. You wouldn't look at this and go, oh, that's animal. And you would go, oh, that's like, animal's brother or something. It would be that close. But that was still a little too close for my comfort. I had originally intended to give him fleece arms, but if I had done that, it would have basically been animal. So I ended up changing the design to give him big furry like live hands. And that was different enough for my comfort that I went, okay, this is definitely not animal. This is just a Muppetish looking thing that in its construction is kind of similar to animal, but the design is different. It's obviously a different character. That's the thing. It has to be sort of legally distinct from a copyrighted character. So that's it. So, when you're working in this is the whole Muppet thing is like, it's a style now. It's almost like, saying cubism or postmodernism, or it's that kind of thing. It's a style more than it is a specific copyright. So, that is the style I work in for sure. I've never claimed that I don't. I absolutely love that style. That's what I do. But it is a thing to be aware of. I don't want to get too close to any specific Muppet, right? Because then that's not my design anymore, first of all, and it's also illegal, so don't do it. So back to the fleece. No problem. Happy to answer questions. My pleasure. So we've got these two green fleeces here from Puppet Pelts, and this one is called Frog. And it is, as you can see, quite a vibrant green. So the color change that Kermit underwent was when the old Antron fleece was no longer available, was they changed his color. And this was during the Jim Henson years, so Jim oversaw this, to this much more vibrant, almost neon green. Before that, Kermit was a much more kind of subtler shade, more muted shade, and this is Puppet Pelt's offering for the closer match to the older Kermits, not the original, because the original Kermit wasn't green. We'll get into that in a sec if you like. But anyway, so you can see the color difference. This stuff, which is called Lizard, is a more subtle, less intense green. This is my preferred. I like the older Kermits anyway. I like the sort of 70s era Kermits. And this is my preferred green. That's what I made. You can actually, this way. That's what this Smol is. That's Lizard. So I think in order to differentiate, because I try to make my puppets all kind of unique, at least as unique as I can get. They are going to be unique even using the same design, just by virtue of the fact that we're working with soft fabrics and the fabrics move around and shift, and every puppet is different even if you make them to a pattern. It's, as I talked to it last time, it's really hard to make two puppets identical, even working from the same materials and the same patterns. I had a cat called Kermit. What color did he start out? He started out, so Kermit wasn't even a frog at first. Kermit started out on Jim's first show, which was called Sam and Friends. And Sam and Friends was this weird little, it was in black and white, so nobody knew what Kermit was in the first place. But Kermit started out as this kind of weird, pointy, lizardy creature. And the fabric that he was made out of was actually kind of a greeny turquoise. It was kind of a bluish green. And he wasn't called Kermit the Frog. And I think the legend goes, Kermit was just a character, and Kermit became a popular character. He was very different from the Kermit that we know now. He wasn't this kind of kind, gentle leader sort of thing. He was a kind of intense, almost agitator. But he would take Kermit on like talk shows and things. And I think it was Johnny Carson that actually first said, "Oh, here's Jim Henson and Kermit the Frog." And from that moment on, Kermit just became a frog. But he didn't start out a frog, and he didn't start out green. He started out turquoise. And you can still see there are a couple of surviving original Kermits around. I know one's in the Smithsonian. And you can look up the pictures online. It's startling how different he was, although still essentially the same. The head shape, he was much pointier at first. I've studied Kermit because I want to make a really good Kermit for myself. And so to do that, you have to sort of study, and it's amazing how different he's got through the years. There are many designs of Kermits, and he has changed quite a lot over the years. But it's so specific that, like, the basic Kermit is a fairly simple puppet. Kermit is really just a kind of sock puppet, but the angles and the construction are so specific that if you get it even slightly wrong, it just looks really off. So that's what's taken me so long to build a Kermit, is I'm trying to get it just perfect. I'm getting a phone call from the building door. Well, you can try and find your way in. But yeah, so there's a big long Kermit story. I don't. Here's an interesting question that I don't know now that you bring it up, Pie Wackets. If I wanted to, like, I'm building a Kermit just for me. I'm not going to sell them, but if I were to do that on stream, I wonder if that would be if that would be legal, right? Because I'm broadcasting something that is a copyrighted image, so that's probably not cool. But anyway, I'm not going to do that. But that's an interesting question. Hello, Jimmy. I've got the door. I've got the building door. I've got the cat here. Sorry, everybody. I'm live on the internet. So anyway, what it comes down to is this is the nylon fleece, i.e. Nyla fleece, that I am going to be using for skin for the Smol, which is slightly different from the original. But it feels nice. It's nice and thick. I think you're right. Unfortunately, I'd like to have seen that. Yeah. Well, I will be building one of the Greeblies on stream at some point, and the head of the Greebly is actually a heavily modified Kermit. The shape is very, very similar to Kermit. And its construction is also very similar to Kermit in that there is no foam in it. The Kermit, as you may know, is just fleece, and there's a lining in there as well. But the difference between my Greebly and a Kermit is my Greeblies don't have the flexible mouth plates. Thank you. I'm glad you found the channel too. It's intended to just kind of be a hanging out, chill kind of thing. Today's stream is going to be a lot of me hand sewing, FYI. So we're going to just sit back and chill out. I'm going to stream during it because the kind of intention is for me to just do what I do every day anyway, but just have some cameras on. So, it might get boring. If it gets boring, feel free to go somewhere else, but I'm just going to be doing what I do every day anyway. So to get going on this skin here, let me just put this aside because we need to get out the patterns. What camera are we on? Okay. Thankfully, it sounds like my wife answered the door. So this is the same pattern that I don't know, Pie Wackets, if you were around for the first stream, but we built a foam body, this thing, in the first stream. So this is the under structure of the whole thing. This is the same pattern as what foam was. And there's another little piece on here as well. I could have made another template for the skin because the skin is slightly different. But instead what I did, so the differences between the foam pattern and the fleece skin, there's two differences. One, in the mouth, I got to add a 1/4 inch, and that's why I have this note here to myself to add a 1/4 inch inside the mouth, and that is for the inner lip here. You see that the skin will come down and then go around and sort of fold into the mouth. That's what that 1/4 inch add-on is for. I missed most of it, but I followed on YouTube and we'll watch later. Cool, excellent. I don't know if I'm going to put all of the archives up on YouTube because my plan is to stream every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And if I were to put all those archives up on YouTube, the YouTube channel would be nothing but the archives of the live stream. So I'm still thinking about that. I feel like I should archive them somewhere though. This Twitch only keeps them around for 2 weeks or so. Anyway. The other difference is on the end of the Smol, there's a little sleeve. I can show that here. So most puppets made for the camera will have some kind of little sleeve on the bottom, and that's just in case the puppeteer goes too high up in the frame. This gives a little insurance, so you won't see their arm. When I made the first Smol, that one in the picture there, I actually made the sleeve as a separate piece and then just ladder stitched it on later. And it worked fine, it looked good, but it was also that seems like too much labor when I can just build the sleeve as part of the overall skin. seemed more logical. So what I ended up doing, this guy just sold, by the way. This one last night, somebody just bought this one, which was neat to wake up to. Notification, somebody has purchased your puppet. So what I ended up doing was making this little kind of add-on to the template, and I put these registration marks, and so when I trace out the template, I just put this on, and there's the sleeve with the dart that lines up, and so that way I didn't have to make a whole other template. I just use that one. So what we gotta do, this aside for a sec. What we got to do is get our fleece here. Now, nylon fleece, most fleece, in fact, but nylon fleece particularly, there is some stretch. This is one of the reasons, one of the many reasons why nylon fleece is used as puppet skins, because you can stretch it and wrap it around stuff. In the case of nylon fleece, that stretch is much stretchier in one direction than another. So let's see. So in this case, the stretch is going this way, up and down, as I have it laying, rather than this way. This is not very stretchy. This is very stretchy. So the rule is you want the stretch going across the body. So you want it going at a 90 degree angle to gravity, basically. You don't want it going up and down, you want it going across. And the reason for that is because over time, gravity actually does pull it down, and so you want it to like not sag over time. So that's why you do that. So we want to make sure that the stretch is going side to side this way, and it is. You'll also notice that I have this doubled up. So this is the back. Fleece, I'm not sure if I can get a good close-up here, but let's try. Show you on maybe a smaller piece. Go into the scrap bag and grab a little piece. Here we go. This is some lizard. We can get the autofocus. There we go. So one side is this netting, and then the other side is the nice soft plush fibers. Right, so I've got it folded this way, back to back. And it's doubled up because, well, you'll see in a moment. It's faster to do it this way, basically. We have to cut out the same as the foam. We're cutting out two and then attaching them together. In this case, for sewing. But this is just a much quicker way of cutting out two. So what you want to do is get a pattern and a pen. The pen is interesting, actually. So a lot of people will take Sharpie or that kind of marker to mark their patterns on the fleece. And that's mostly okay, except for, of course, if you're, depending on how you're doing your stitches, those pen marks can soak through sometimes. They can also, like if your stitches are together and the fabric folds and then you get a piece showing, you can actually see the pen marks. You don't want that. So the solution to that is to either use a marker that closely matches the fabric color, which, even then you got to be able to see it, so it's still going to be a darker color. The other answer is to use one of these. Let's see if I can get a good close-up. These are water and air soluble markers. Autofocus, please. So much for the auto. Anyway, you can see that. Tailor's chalk is useful, except for it's quite thick. I know you can get thinner ones, but I've never been able to again, this is more down to my clumsiness than anything, but it's so thick, and its intention is for sort of big marks, whereas this sometimes you have to get pretty fine detail. So I find that these markers work great for that kind of thing, because like the tailor's chalk, like say trying to trace this little dart. This little dart's only an inch and a half. Trying to get in there with a big chunk of tailor's chalk and do that, meh, it's probably not going to work so great. You're going to lose some definition. And also, I find it's just messy. Like, it just gets everywhere. Again, I'm clumsy, so I prefer this disappearing ink. So this stuff will mark pretty much anything, and this disappears in 24 to 48 hours. So it's not permanent. So if you do make a mistake, it's going to vanish. So you don't have to worry about it. So this is what I use for everything. I use the air. So there's two sides. There's the purple side is air soluble, and the blue side is water soluble. So this will stay permanent until you sort of dab it with something moist. I don't intend to dab it with anything moist. So I'm going to use the air soluble side, and we're just going to trace the pattern, and we're not going to forget to add the 1/4 inch inside the mouth. And I'm not saying that because I've never done that before. I've never cut out an entire skin of a Smol and forgotten to add my 1/4 inch. Of course not. I'm a professional. Why would I ever forget that? So we're just tracing that. You have to be more or less accurate, but you don't have to worry too much. I never worry too much about super accuracy because, like I said before, I like a bit of asymmetry and organicness in my puppets. So you'll also notice, you can see it on the camera, yeah, I've marked these registration marks here. Oh, look at that. I missed one of the lines. Oh no. It's okay, we'll just line it back up. Speaking of not needing accuracy, there we go. That's good. So I've got these registration marks here, and these are so I know where to add in. It's slipping off the table, of course. My little end piece for the sleeves. Hello, Jimmy, you've come to interrupt again. Stay away from that bag. Yes. I don't know if you can hear the filter on the mic. I'm using the NVIDIA broadcast plugin for the mic and this camera, and the mic filter's really good. I looked at the playback from the last stream, and like, unless I had the hairdryer next to the thing, you couldn't even hear the hairdryer I was holding in my hand 6 inches away. Like, that's pretty amazing. Well done, NVIDIA. So there we go. We're just adding in our extra piece for this sleeve. No, it sounded like it was not, yeah, I know. It was, I couldn't believe it when I watched the playback. I've got a fan going that's not quiet right now, and I'll bet you can't hear it if I... Yep, you can't hear that. Amazing. Well, it's because it's not a noise gate. It's actually like using AI to model sound waves. It's looking for a human voice and trying to filter anything else out. It's amazing. Okay, so there is our pattern trace. Now, what are we not going to forget? We're not going to forget to add in a 1/4 inch. I put the pen away, of course. Yes, Jimmy. Thank you for reminding me. You're a good cat. To add in the 1/4 inch inside the mouth. This is a actually, I don't know what they call it. It's like a gauge. It's like a seam allowance gauge that lets you just kind of measure easily where you want to add a seam allowance. This isn't really a seam allowance. This is adding length, but it's the same principle. And when I get to the end, I kind of want to go about a 1/4 inch in this way. You see what I mean? It's like beveled. I don't know how well you can see that. Yeah, you can see that pretty good. It's like beveled inward. So this is the inside of the mouth here, and this is where the fabric mouth plate is going to get sewn. So there we go. It's okay to eyeball a little bit. I also like your music. It's pleasant and unobtrusive. Yes, this is the Twitch soundtrack or something, I think it's called. It's like the thing they put out to help you go, well, we know you want music on your stream, but most of it's copyrighted. And we don't want to get hit with DCMA complaints. So here's the stuff that's safe for you to use. So the next thing we're going to do is pin this all together. So remember, we've got this doubled up as two sides here. So the first thing is to start pinning both of those together. And we're going to use a fair number of pins. Here's something that when I started building, nobody talked about. And I wish they had, so I'll talk about it now. Pinning. It's important to pin, and it's important to use lots of pins. But there's like a technique to pinning that I found. I don't know if everybody does this, but I do it because I'm clumsy and I don't like to poke myself with pins. So what I do is I put the pin in through both layers. I come up through both layers, see that, and then I poke it through again, but just the first layer. So the actual tip of the pin is kind of nestled between the two layers, and I'm much less likely to poke myself with a pin in that case. Little tip. So when you pin, you want to use a fair amount, probably more than you think you should. I've also got lots of bench pins. This is from working with fur. Fur can be tough on pins, tougher on the causes of pins. So you got to be careful with the bent ones. I should just throw the bent ones out. I've got a whole box of pins. Pins are cheap. I don't know why I bother keeping these bent ones around. Same reason I never change my needle. I like the continuity. The build up, I don't know, karma or something. But anyway, we are pinning. Maestro, some pinning music, please. That time said, oh, we're almost at the time for break. So you'll see I'm using a fair amount. Because this fabric, and this is also true of fur, particularly true of fur, because there's a thickness to it, there's a pile, there's a tendency when you put two pieces together for them to shift and slide around. And the more pins you use, the less that will happen. It's still going to happen. I have yet to find a way to make it not happen. So that's another reason why you kind of have to build into your designs allowances for a degree of inaccuracy. It's one of the nice things about the Smol is a certain degree of, as I think we coined last time, lumpiness is kind of nice in the Smol. They look like little potatoes or something. So there we go. So yeah, I'm just pinning around the inside, just around the outline. Even places that don't, like this, for example, it's off camera, down here, this is actually the opening, right? This is where your hand goes in. So that's obviously in the finished product not going to be pinned together, but I am pinning it together here because when we cut it out, we wanted to sort of keep everything in place. So. There we go. Should I add one there? I'm probably going to worry about it too much. This is another reason why streaming this is kind of a natural extension, because I have a tendency to talk to myself while I do this anyway. I might as well pretend I'm talking to people on the stream. I am talking to people on the stream. FYI. But my point is, when I'm sitting here alone doing this, it's not really that different than streaming it. So might as well put the camera on. Also, the direction that your pins go in can matter. And I haven't been paying attention to that, so I tend to like to have them sort of all pointing down. That way when I'm handling it, I kind of know ahead of time where it is. And in this case, I'm not doing that. I'm having it point up, so at least have it be consistent. See, every once in a while Frankie comes out. Just when I'm being self-critical. He's like a Jiminy Cricket with more personality. Yeah, I'm exactly like Jiminy Cricket. Boy, you nailed that one, kid. It's the first thing people say about me when they look at me. They go, look at that guy. He looks just like a cricket. All right. So our Smol is pinned. I'll take sentences I never thought I'd say for 20. Okay, so now we gotta cut this baby out. For that, we get the good scissors in their lovely sheath. These are Ginger scissors. These ain't cheap. If you're gonna cut expensive fabric, you need expensive scissors to do it with. Otherwise, you're gonna mangle your expensive fabric, and you don't want that. So the first thing I'm gonna do is kind of bulk cut. Just do a rough cut around the whole thing. And unfortunately, scissors are one of those things where you do get what you pay for. There we go. Let me just fold this up. I shouldn't fold it because, as you can see, it actually gets like fold marks fairly easily. So the better thing to do is to roll it. The absolute best thing is to hang it over like a dowel or something, but I don't have that kind of room. So I try to roll my bolts of fabric. And that way they'll only get a few wrinkles rather than a lot. So fleece, the kind of fleece you go into like a bulk fabric store, like a Joann's or something, that stuff is polar fleece. It's what you make like sweatshirts and stuff out of. That stuff isn't expensive. And in fact, you can make puppets with that, and a lot of people do. It's not as nice as this nylon fleece. This nylon fleece, Nyla fleece, is used, I have been told, I don't know how accurate this is, but I have been told that this stuff is used for exactly two purposes. One is to make puppets. Two is apparently the tips in bingo dabbers are made out of nylon fleece, and that's it. That's the only things that this stuff is used for anymore. But yeah, this stuff, because the actual fabric itself isn't that expensive, but it only comes in white. And so if you want it any color other than white, you have to either dye it yourself or have it hand dyed at its source. And this is what one of the things that the good people of puppet pelts do, is they hand dye fleece. So that's where the cost comes in, because it's labor intensive. The polar fleece stuff that you would go into a fabric store and buy, that's all machine dyed. That's all like that in a factory. So where to start? I'm feeling a little jittery. So the most important part of this is to not have any frayed edges or snippy bits around the mouth. Is that something you're going to see? All the rest of this is sort of going to get sewn together. So if you got a little bit of fraying on the edge, that's okay. So I'm going to do the mouth last. And the important thing here, since this fabric is stretchy, is to not stretch while you're cutting. That's important, because then the cut will be all kind of distorted. I hope this is mostly not on camera, is it? That's going to happen. Like I said last time, I got to do a lot of this stuff close up. and it's not really possible for me to get a camera in a convenient place for that. Although I did look into it. I looked into like, what I really need is like the Google Glass kind of like head mounted thing, so you could just see what I'm seeing. But A, who ever heard of Google Glass anymore? And B, yeah, I could get like a helmet and a GoPro or something. In fact, this camera here, this top-down camera is a GoPro. I'm not gonna do that. That would be ridiculous. And if I can't look like a Borg, I'm not doing it. There we go. Yeah, that's just, yeah, it's unfortunately just the nature of this kind of thing. Yeah. This is one of those cases where it's like, do I keep this? Yeah, I'll keep this because like this is enough to make a couple of like eyelids, for example, out of this. So I'll keep this in the scrap bag. This is the good stuff. Don't throw out the good stuff. What time we got? Okay, we got 9 minutes to the break. Let's get this cut out. I will be coming back very shortly after the break, so I'll just put up the "I'll be right back" screen. Okay, now we got to get precise, and I think I'll switch to smaller scissors for that. And these are also Ginger. The Ginger? Yeah, they're Ginger. It's a brand name of very good quality scissors. Actually, my other Gingers, my big ones, they need sharpening pretty desperately, and that's something I haven't actually done yet. I gotta learn that. Not on stream. I'm gonna leave the streams for things that I already know how to do. That way I don't look like a fool. Maybe not. I'll probably do some streams of like not me building something pre-planned, but me just messing around with stuff. Because I think that'll be fun to watch. Fun to watch me make mistakes. Alright, so I didn't do great on that. That mouth is kind of little divot in the mouth there. That's okay. That'll get worked out when I sew the mouth plate in. So that's it for cutting it out. What kind of time we got? Okay. I'll start sewing, but I'm going to be taking a break soonish. This orange thread out of here. Because the last puppet I made was orange. And this thread is nodding, not cooperating. There we go. So, in terms of color of thread, you're probably not going to get anything that's going to match 100%. Very lucky if you do, but you just got to get close enough. The way that the thread works and the way that the stitches work for this kind of thing, if you see the stitches, it's unlikely, and in the places that you do, it really kind of doesn't matter. So let me see. That's pretty close. That's not bad. So we'll use this. So we could start talking about stitching, but it'd probably take longer than the 5.5 minutes that we've got to the break. So I'll talk about the intricacies and the kind of stitches that I do for this after the break. That'll be our lead-in topic. We'll just get Sorry, I'm looking at Twitter. I should turn Twitter off while I stream. Shared a screenshot this morning from Assassin's Creed Valhalla that was just like a little thing I took with photo mode. And my friend Andrew just replied, "Kevin, why are you sharing concept art from the game? This is silly. It looks that good. It looks real good." Quite liking it. Okay. Oh, hey, crazy camera. What the heck was that? Okay. We're back. So like I said, we'll talk about actual stitches and the different kinds of stitches. Maybe I should switch to, because this is it now. This is the bulk of the rest of the stream is going to be me sitting here like this. So FYI, welcome to the chill zone. So how y'all doing out there? I got myself an Xbox yesterday, and I'm enjoying it. Why not machine? Good question. In fact, I'm glad you asked, because I was going to talk about that and I literally just forgot. Machine stitches are really, really hard to seam blend. Nearly impossible. I do sew like the regular greeblies. I'll machine sew that whole thing except for the mouth plate, because that's tricky to put on the machine. But they're really hard to seam blend, and in things like the Smol and the deluxe greebly and some of my higher end, as it were, models, I like to try and blend the seam a little bit. You're never going to get it perfect, but you'll get it pretty good, and that is something you can only do with hand stitching. Hand stitching is just higher quality in general, but that's why it's much easier to blend the seams. And I'll talk about, after we come back from the break, I'll talk about the specific stitch that I'm using, which is even easier to blend, and it's not the ladder stitch. Those of you who are sewers out there be shocked I'm not using a ladder stitch. All right, well, so the studio door is closed and Jimmy is desperate to get out. So I am going to go on break right now, actually. So I'll be back in a minute, and I'll see you after the break. Hello, I'm back. The 2 minutes of silence to commemorate Remembrance Day, and the reason I seem distracted is because in order to commemorate Remembrance Day, there's some kind of ceremony, of course, happening right now, and there are World War II era planes flying around near my apartment, so it sounds loud, of course, as they do. I think they're gone. Okay. Oh, I can still hear the propeller out there. Let's see if the NVIDIA broadcast mic is good enough to filter out. I don't know. I don't even know what kind of plane it is. It's definitely propeller driven, though. No, I don't think we're actually actively being invaded. So, we were talking about stitches. And why do I hand stitch versus machine stitch? And like I said, machine stitching is great and fast and strong, and also impossible to blend the seam. Sometimes that's not a problem. It really depends on what the puppet is and where the seam is and all that kind of stuff. And sometimes that's fine for the puppet. As a matter of fact, my regular greeblies are like that. They're all machine stitched. Even the seam up the middle of the head is machine stitched, and it's fine. It's just part of the design. But when I want to do something a little bit higher end, oh, there they are. I don't know if the mic picked that up or not, but yeah, there's. Actually, I think they may be World War One. That sounds like a biplane. Sup with camel or something. Anyway. Boy, this is a real distraction stream, isn't it? This is like all the things are happening. Last time was like, oh, real focused. This time, I got phone calls. I got the cat. The cat's yelling again at the door. I should open the door, let the cat in. I'm gonna open the door and let the cat in. Because that's the thing that happens on streams. Hi, Jimmy. Oh, you're gone now. Are you gonna come in? No. No, you're just going to be annoying. You still want the door closed. Here, you don't actually need the door fully closed, so we'll make it so you can come in as you like. What a diva. Okay. Now he comes in, of course. Cats, huh? So if you can hear me over the cat and the biplane. Yes, Jimmy. You want to go up in a biplane? I wouldn't advise it. You're scared of everything. Slightly loud noises and unexpected gestures frighten you. He's a big scaredy cat. So, getting back to the hand stitching thing. There are a number of stitches that are used in puppet building. The most common stitch is something called the whip stitch, and if you know sewing, you know what a whip stitch is. Whip stitch is real simple. It's just going in and out along the edge and sort of looping the thread over. If you think of a ring binder, like a spiral notebook binding, that thing along the spine, that's a whip stitch. That's how a whip stitch works. And it's nice and strong. It's a great stitch to learn, and it's also real simple. The stitch that's used, sorry, something just went beep. The stitch that's used most often if you want to do seam blending, so if you want to try and make the seam less visible, is something called a ladder stitch, which is a quilting stitch. And that's a little more complex to explain. I don't really have a camera where I can demonstrate it. But you can Google it. It's the properties of the stitch are designed to be done from the outside of the fabric. So whip stitching is generally done from the inside. So you've got the two pieces like this, inside out, back to back, and then you whip stitch along wherever you want the seam. A ladder stitch is designed to be done from the outside. So the pieces together, and you join them together from the outside. And it's designed to kind of take the ends of the fabric like this and then sort of curl them in like that. So what happens is a lot of the fibers kind of get caught between that seam, and then you can go back with like a pin or a needle and pick those fibers out and blend the seam together and make it look much less visible. And that's the kind of stitch that most people would use for doing the kind of thing that I'm doing right now. This is, the top of the head, and I'm just going along the head. Actually, I gotta go around the whole body. But I'm trying to do a very unintrusive seam. I'm not doing a ladder stitch. You'll notice this is still inside out. And I am doing a inverse baseball stitch. Now, a baseball stitch is the kind of stitch that they use to put together baseballs, hence the name. It's the one you go in one side, then in the other, and then in one side and in the other. Again, it's the kind of thing you'd have to Google to really get a good picture of. But it's another stitch like the ladder stitch that is intended to be used from the outside of the fabric, because it does a similar thing. It kind of rolls the fabric together and pokes it out. So there are a lot of urban legends in puppet building based around stitches. There has developed this myth that there is a thing called the Henson stitch, and that the Henson stitch is a stitch that will allow you to take two pieces of fabric, probably fleece, and stitch them together so that it is absolutely 100% invisible. You cannot see the stitch at all. And that this is what's up the middle of Kermit's nose, for example. I have been unable to locate specifically where this myth began. I have some theories. I'm not going to bother sharing them with you here because they are just theories, and I'm not trying to preach the truth or anything. However, this is just a thing that was kind of been accepted in puppet building circles. There is this thing called the Henson stitch, and the stitch that everybody thinks is the Henson stitch is in fact the ladder stitch, because it's designed to be used from the outside of the fabric, and it's designed to be pickable very easily. And so everyone thinks that the ladder stitch is the Henson stitch, also sometimes called the puppet stitch for that reason. So a while ago, I want to say about 6 months ago, did he make his own puppets to start with? Yeah, Jim made the first Kermit and all that stuff. He made them alongside his wife Jane. Jane actually does not get nearly the credit that she deserves. It was really Jim and Jane that started the Muppets, and Jane built most of them, and also performed on Sam and Friends. So yeah, Jim was always a builder, even in the later days when they were big and they had the big shop. He would go in and build stuff. But they, of course, as they got bigger and bigger, they couldn't build it all themselves, so they would hire people to come in, and there was a whole, a creature shop that would build all the Muppets, and that's still going. The Henson Workshop is still a thing. They mostly work on Sesame Street now because, here, you want some inside baseball? I'll give you some. When Disney took over the Muppets, they fired pretty much everybody from the building workshop, and they ended up contracting out the puppet building stuff. It is currently being done by a company called Puppet Heap, I believe, who are a very good studio. But what ended up happening was, of course, a lot of the original builders got let go, and they went, well, fine, well, whatever, but I'm taking my patterns. So a lot of the original patterns for the Muppets just left when those people did. And so what Puppet Heap had to do was kind of recreate them from scratch, which is why if you look at some of the Muppets nowadays, they don't look quite right. There's a little about them, or they don't look like what you're used to. They look great, they look fine, but they're not the same as they were, right? And that's why. Spreading the rumors on the internet about puppets. What do you think you're doing? Anyway, where was I? The Henson Stitch. So recently, the Museum of the Moving Image, and by recently I mean in the past year, I think, did an interview with some of the principal builders from the Henson Workshop during the Muppet Show era. So that was Bonnie Erickson, Carolee Wilcox, I can't remember who else. It was like 3 or 4 of them. And it was fascinating. You can find it on YouTube. Go to the Museum of the Moving Image page on YouTube, and they'll have it there somewhere. It's called like Creating Jim Henson's World or something like that. And so during the Q&A, they were asked directly, "What's the Henson Stitch?" And the very first thing they did was all start laughing their heads off, because of course they get asked this all the time. And the information that came out, now this is from like Carolee Wilcox, is probably my favorite puppet builder of all time. She, and again, how nerdy do you have to be to know the name of one of the principal builders in the Henson Workshop? She built some of the nicest Kermits. Kermit is, of course, for many people, myself included, kind of the holy grail of puppetry. She built the Kermits during the Muppet Show years, and so this was just, she built like the Kermits for the Muppet movie, and they are the most beautiful, perfect Kermits that, in my opinion at least, that there were. So these are the people who know, right? Like these are the people who know how they were built and know all the secrets. How long would a Muppet last before you typically be replaced? So that's a really tough question, because it kind of depends. They don't generally build as many as you might think. You would think there's like 30 Kermits or something, and there isn't. There's usually maybe like 3 or 4 at a time, and they would only build one when they needed it for a specific thing. So if Kermit needed to have a different costume or something, I'm not sure how Kermit is built anymore, but sometimes you'll build a Kermit so that the head could come off and then get put on a different body that has a different costume or something like that. So it's really tough to say. Now, it would depend, you could have a Kermit that lasts for, a year of shooting and it's fine. Or you could do, like a really intense shoot that has a lot of stunts or something in it, and that thing would wear out in one shoot. And then they don't often replace them. They usually do a lot of repairs. It's rare that you actually need to do a full rebuild. You do a lot of repairs. So it's a really tough question to answer because it varies so wildly. But they don't build as many and as often as you think. There aren't that many out there. It's not like there's a warehouse full of Fozzies, So anyway, they were asked this question about the Henson Stitch, and they all started laughing. And so they said, well, the thing about that is that they've experienced through the years is everybody you ask about, or everybody that says, anything about the Henson Stitch, everybody thinks it's a different stitch. Most people have settled on, it was probably a ladder stitch. But that's not 100% of the people. Some people think it was a whip stitch. Some people think it was a baseball stitch. Some people think so there's no definitive answer about what the quote-unquote Henson Stitch was. And the fact is, there's only so many ways you can stick a needle into fabric. Like, we've probably found them all. So we would know, somebody would know, if there is a Henson Stitch, what that stitch is. So everybody has a different answer about what the Henson Stitch is. Now, one of the places that I have found is probably one of the sources for the myth of the Henson Stitch is that there was an early Muppet builder whose name, and you won't believe this, it was a complete coincidence. He didn't join the Muppets until after Kermit was a character. But his name was Kermit Love. Talk about karma, huh? And he was one of the early builders that Jim worked with when he was establishing like an external shop. Kermit Love had a particular stitch that he liked to do for puppet skins. And that stitch, and it was unusual, and that's why it stood out. It was a baseball stitch, but done from the inside. That is the first instance I can find of anybody going, oh, that's unusual, and it is unusual, but I'll show you what's interesting about it in the first place. So I tried it. When I heard them say this, I went, let's just see what happens when you do that. And what happens is, I can show you. Let's see if we can get to a close-up cam. So the stitch I've been doing all along here, all along this edge, this is a reverse baseball stitch. And when you look at this stitch, remember, I haven't picked these seams yet or anything. That's not bad as a stitch goes. That's pretty good. And if I were to I'm not even going to pick it. I'm just going to sort of rub along the stitch. You can start blending that stitch pretty good, very easily. That's Kermit Love's reverse baseball stitch, and or inverse baseball stitch. And it's called inverse because I'm doing it from the inside, not the outside. So if there ever was a Henson stitch, this is probably what it was. And I've actually shown this to a fellow puppet builder who hadn't tried it, and he was like, whoa, this is really good. So it's like special, knowledge, and now you know it too. There's a benefit to watching the stream. You get some secrets. But that's why I do the reverse baseball stitch or inverse baseball stitch for seams that I want to blend easily. The disadvantage of it, and this also goes for the ladder stitch, is it's not the strongest stitch. You can sort of take this and pull it and snap the threads, and the whole seam will kind of come apart. So it's not great for anything structural, which this kind of is structural. So, but what I have learned, so if you want to do a good, strong structural stitch, you do a whip stitch, or for preference, a locking whip stitch. Is puppet building more prolific than a layperson would realize? Good question. Yes. I was surprised. So I don't know, Pywackets, if you were around for my little tale about how I got into this. If not, it's in the stream archive. I'm not going to go through it again. But just over 2 years ago, I decided I was going to start doing something to do with puppets. And it was this is how the Oracle came about. And this was before I started building seriously. So I had to get some puppets. And I had no idea how or where to go, or where do you buy a puppet, right? So I started looking around, and of course one of the major places to look is Etsy, because these are all handmade things. So, of course. And I was pleasantly shocked to find that there's quite a few builders and studios and just like people making not just little sock puppets or whatever, but like really good quality Muppet looking puppets. Here comes Jimmy again. Would you like to tell the story, or should I? Yeah. But yeah, it's way more volume, than I ever would have realized, because I assumed, just like everybody else, that the Muppets have had their heyday. It's not a real popular thing anymore. It's a very, very niche thing, and it is a very niche thing. Let's not kid ourselves. This is a small community, but it's and saying it's a small community, we're talking like hundreds of thousands of people still. So that's not nothing. And there's enough demand out there that there's studios, and individual builders like myself who make a living off of doing this. And I genuinely was shocked to learn that, as I'm sure you are now. I mean, don't get me wrong, I ain't I ain't raking in the bucks. But it's a good supplementary income. Like you can make a couple of bucks off of doing this. And more to the point, it's incredibly fun. How nice is it that I get to do this, right? Like that's amazing. So it is a small community, but a very dedicated one. It's like people who are puppet people are puppet people, and it's cool. And there's a lot of sort of goodwill. Like the builders that I know quite a few just on the internet. There's no like sense of competition. Like I'm friendly with other builders. I refer people. Like I don't do custom orders very often. And I usually, like when I get a custom order request, unless it's like, oh, can I have a Greebly in orange? If it's like a real like from scratch custom thing, I have a builder. Her name is Kaylee Trevor. She works in a company that she owns called Prairie Puppets. If you've seen the Oracle she built, Nigel the Newt, I'll refer people to her. Like I just don't have the time or really the inclination to do completely from scratch, because you can get into the weeds real easy on that, and it takes a long time, and the cost, because it takes a long time, is really high, and I like to try and keep my costs down so people can afford these things. So I just don't do custom orders generally, but I refer those people who I could say, yeah, give me your money, but I don't. I pass them on to her because that's what she does. And there's no sabotage or sense of competition. It's just we're all just doing our thing. If you make a good puppet, you will sell the good puppet. That's what it comes down to. And there's not enough people out there who want them. That it's good. So yes, very much so. There is much more out there than you would ever think. Just start looking on YouTube. There are lots of little channels just like mine. Some of which are now using my puppets that I'm building. Jordy's Place, for example, just bought a Smol. But yeah, there's a lot out there. There's a lot. I will say the quality level varies, shall we say politely. Puppeteering is not easy, and I just realized I forgot to cut out a dart. Aha. But that's okay. I'll cut that in a second. Puppeteering is really difficult. So, of course, not everybody who's doing it is going to be great at it. Like, you're not going to get Jim Henson, Frank Oz level puppeteering on, some little person's YouTube channel. Like, that's just not going to happen. Most people who can puppeteer that well are working professionally, on Sesame Street and stuff. So, that's not going to happen. But there's a lot of great stuff out there. People can get very creative, and again, thanks to the internet, anybody can be a star. But let me just, there you go. I got to cut out this dart, and I got to come right up to it. I got distracted from talking about the stitching. Yes, so the reverse baseball stitch. Oh, I finished that story. Good. So now you know why I do the inverse baseball stitch for the seams that I want to blend. It's also a very, kind of weird to say, but it's kind of relaxing, the stitch. It's easy to do. So I can sit here and talk about whatever and still do the stitching. So the plan is hopefully today or maybe not finish the skin today, because this is going to take forever. This is how much I've done, and look at how much there is left to do. There's a lot. So I think I may actually end, how long have we been going? Hour 25. We'll go for like 2 hour mark. And see how far we can get. I'll probably finish the skin off camera, and then the next stream we'll sort of put everything together. And we'll do like the arms and the eyes and the hair, and that's the fun stuff. This is the grunt work right here. So I've almost got up to where that dart is, so that means I'm going to tie this off. And let me just... The other nice thing about the inverse baseball stitch is it's really easy to transition from the baseball stitch into a whip stitch, which is what I'll do at the ends, because it's good and strong. So if any pressure gets put on them, the baseball stitch or the whip stitch can take it. But here we go. I'm just going to tie that off, give her a snip, and then cut out this dart that I failed to cut out before. You see? No, let's do this. See right here, this little dart here? Didn't cut that out. Let's do that now. This is the dart in the top of the head, so the head has some shape. There we go. Oh, beverage time. Okay. So yeah, as long as I've got a topic that I know at least something about, I can just talk and sew. This is the talking and sewing stream. Boy, Jimmy is on today. Yes, I see you out there. Hi. Maybe you could go have one of those naps that cats are so famous for. Have you tried that? I mean, I know you can sleep. Jimmy is a big suck, a big scaredy cat, and he's a little bit codependent on me. But that's okay. He's also my buddy. Among the reasons that I woke up at 4 a.m. and couldn't get back to sleep was somebody had to have a cuddle. And when Jimmy wants to have a cuddle, you know it, because you've got a giant hot furry thing sitting on you. And there ain't no getting back to sleep after that. Okay. Secondly, as I'm going, I'm sure you probably noticed, as I'm going, I'm taking the pins out as I pass the area where the pins are holding it together. So I'm going to start, so I'm starting new. Now again, because this is a dart, I'm not sewing down this way. That dart has to close up laterally across the head, so that doesn't get closed until I flip it around and unpin it. So I'm starting down here, so we're just going to start with a few whip stitches first. And the reason I start with a few whip stitches, I learned this from experience, is if I started doing the reverse baseball stitch, inverse baseball stitch, because what happens is it, like I said, it pushes it this way, but that means on the outside it's actually kind of doing this, and that's why the fibers come out, and you don't need to blend that much because they're already kind of out. Because it pushes it out like this, if you put a little knot in the thread and then do that, it pushes the knot out the front, and so you get this ugly kind of wad of thread exposed on the exterior of the puppet, and you don't want that. So a couple of whip stitches. Whip stitches you can also blend, it's just not as easy. So a few whip stitches to get it going. And then we transition to the inverse baseball stitch. There we go. It really would. At some point, I'll figure out a close-up cam to actually show you the stitching as I'm doing it, just because I think it's interesting. And that's a really hard thing to do. Even if you look on YouTube, people who are teaching, different stitches, that's how I learned. I just watched YouTube videos and tried to replicate it. Um, it's hard to put a camera close enough and at the right angle where you can actually see what's going on. Uh-oh, there's an update for Star Wars Squadrons. I rather like Star Wars Squadrons. I am thoroughly enjoying it. I wonder what the details are. I won't click on it now, but after I get off stream, you bet I will. I even bought a HOTAS. I was lucky enough to find one on eBay. They're hard to find because first Microsoft Flight Simulator got released, and then pretty shortly after that, Star Wars Squadrons gets released. And so suddenly this little niche controller that hardly anybody uses is in demand. And so all the HOTAS is sold out. Fortunately, I had to wait 2 weeks for it to be delivered, but I got one for a reasonable price on eBay. And it is one that I can plug into PS4 or PC. T-Flight HOTAS 4. You came to the puppet stream to hear me talking about flight sticks. What can I say? I'm a man of many interests. We're just sewing to the chill beats. Usually when I'm doing this is when I put on podcast, or some music that is not this. I kind of thought of it and I realized this mic filter is so good. Like if you can't hear that fan, which you can, I know you can, I could probably put on like my own music, just quiet enough that the mic will pick it up, and just pump the chill beats out to the stream. But that I think would be a bit odd. I would be out of sync rhythmically with the rest of the stream. Can't have that. Gonna listen to the chill beats together. So yes, like I said, the plan is today to finish the skin. Probably not on stream because this is it. This is how you do the skin. So what's going to happen is after I'm finished sewing this whole thing, then I'm going to cut the fabric mouth plate, which goes in here, sew that in, and then we glue that to foam interior. So I think what I'm going to do, like I said, I'll keep going until we hit the 2-hour mark for, just cause. It's a pretty chill stream today, but that's good. Last time, I did not expect that raid. Like, this is about, every time I stream, this is about average. I get, 2 to 4 people hanging out, and that's fine, that's great. Like I said, this is just what I would be doing every day anyway, so, So we're just hanging out, and then I'm terribly sorry, Laser something. I've forgotten your username. Another makers and crafting streamer raided me last time, and I got 37, I think was the peak, viewers all at once, and that was, I was stunned, And that was amazing. I got a whole bunch of you followers from that. And I think that's probably, hello, Jimmy. What is with you today? Why do you need so much attention? Do you want to come up and say hello? Come on. Get your butt up here. No? No, because I asked nicely? He's probably going to jump up when I least expect it. There we go. See? I had to turn away first. Yeah. He's gonna get into the mic. Oh, here we go. Live cat wrangling. How's that? Come on, you big suck. Sit down. Let me show you something. This is what I have to put up with every day, okay? This is a little glimpse, the slice of my life. I hope you can still hear me because the cat's right on top of the mic. But I am often making puppets just like this, where I'm having to sew around the cat. I really hope that nobody who buys one of my puppets is terribly allergic to cats, because there's likely Jimmy being sewn into this puppet as we speak. You're gonna get down in a minute, bud. This is just so you're internet famous, right? Want to be a meme? No? Good for you. I've brought you up right. I just checked the Etsy. Do you stick to those designs or do you do others? So I am trying to stick to those designs. My kind of goal is to get enough variety that somebody who's just dropping by will probably find something they like. Like I said before, I don't do 100% custom orders. I could, but like I said, it takes a lot of time and you can really get muddled with 100% custom stuff because people have very specific, ideas in their head. And if you can't do that or, get as specific as they might want, you can just get into the weeds with that kind of thing. So I prefer to make a puppet and then put it up. And what I try and do, all right, Jimmy, Jimmy, this is enough. Jimmy, we gotta talk. Can we, there you go. Good boy. My goal, my whole kind of philosophy with the shop is I'm trying to make stuff that I would want to buy. Like if I came across my store when I was building my collection, when I was first putting the Oracle together, I would stop and go, wow, this is the stuff that I want in my collection. And I'm trying to make something that I would buy, right? Yes, he will play with the thread if I let him. Thankfully, he's too smart for his own good sometimes, but he's smart enough to learn that, nah, don't do that. So yeah, I try and make a wide variety and kind of interesting enough that you're probably going to find something you want on my shop at some point. Maybe not every time, but there's only one of me. So I make them as quickly as I can and get them up on the shop. If somebody wants a custom, I've done a bunch of custom, I want, a Greebly, but in this color with this color hair or something. I can do that. That's fine. The most custom thing I've made is actually on one of the pics on the Be Right Back screens. There's a baby Greebly. He's a little green guy. He's a Greebly, but he's much smaller. That was the most custom order I did, and that was actually because somebody had a client who ordered a Greebly, absolutely loved it, gave it to I think their niece or nephew, and they're small, they're a kid, and it was great, and they loved it, but it was just a little too big for them to operate. So she asked me, can I make one, but kid scale? And that actually wasn't terribly difficult because all of my patterns are, of course, on our computers, so I could just take the vectors and scale them and then print out a new pattern. So that was interesting and a lot of fun. And I think I may actually start doing the little baby Greeblies as a regular or semi-regular offer because they turned out It turned out super cute. I used the same size ping pong balls for the eyes as the adult Greeblies, but I also gave them larger than normal pupils. So they had these big, you know, baby eyes, and it was kind of adorable. And everybody I showed it to went, aw. So yeah, what I do try and do, and one of the things I'll probably end up doing on stream is developing new models for the shop. In fact, Smol, the one I'm building right now, is my most recent sort of design that I'm making for the shop. And the Smol is super interesting. Not super interesting, I guess if you're interested in puppets, it's super interesting. Is notable in that the whole reason I ended up making the Smol in the first place was I did the Stan Winston School of Character Arts courses from a puppet builder who I will be mentioning constantly. His name is BJ Geyer, who is amazing and a mentor. And I learned so much from those courses. And you can go and do it too. It's not expensive. But one of the things that BJ talked about a couple of times is there is a tendency when you start building to make bigger and bigger puppets. And it's kind of hard to explain why, but you kind of get why, because like, get make a big one, yeah, sure. But from the standpoint of a performer, bigger puppets are not better. You can get, well, there's the physical aspect of like if you build bigger is always heavier, and so that means that somebody has to hold this thing up above their head for hours at a time. Ounces count then, like every little thing counts so much. You wouldn't think it. You could pick up like Frankie on the Oracle, for example. He is a big heavy puppet. Now if you were to just pick up Frankie, you would go, oh, this is fine, but after like about 10 minutes of doing this with Frankie, it starts to hurt. Like you start to feel it. And so from the standpoint of a puppeteer, smaller and lighter is better. And with a smaller puppet, when you have a big puppet, you need to make big exaggerated movements to get a good performance out of it. But with a small puppet, you can do very small, tiny things, and it matters. It adds character. And so taking that lesson to heart, I went, how small can I make a puppet so that it would still comfortably fit an adult hand, but yet still feel small, you know? And I first thought of things like Roosevelt Franklin and Prairie Dawn from the Muppets, or from the Sesame Street Muppets, or Robin the Frog is another real good example of that. They're very small, like they barely cover the hand. But the performances that you can get out of them, even so simple as they are fantastic. So was my motivation for like, how can I do this? And I went through a whole bunch of prototypes. Let me see if I can get down while I'm doing this. Here's something interesting. Here's the first prototype for the Smol. I threw the other ones out just because they really weren't good for anything, but I keep this around as kind of my museum. Think of this. That's kind of weird, huh? This is actually real great. I love the shape of this thing. The problem is this neck is so thin. And again, when you lay this out in a flat pattern, like that didn't look that thin, but then when you actually create a 3D object out of it, it gets really thin. So I can put this on barely. I have to struggle to get my arm through it. And every time I do, it tears a little bit. Now this is so good though, like so expressive. You know, just the shape is so pleasing. I really, really love this thing, but this is not a practical thing to sell in the store. Like I can barely get my arm through it, and I have fairly small hands and arms. Anybody bigger than me would tear this thing apart. So I had to move on from this design, but I really, really love this thing. I may actually turn this into a character for the Oracle, because I know what my tolerances are, right? So that's something to think about. But there you go. That's the first iteration of the thing that we're building. You would never believe that. So I went through like 4 different designs before I got the kind of right proportions of the final design. And you see now, it's really kind of the same thing as that, except for it's just much, much thicker and shorter, right? So now, like, I can slip that on, no problem. And it's still very small. I posted a picture yesterday on the Operation Puppet Twitter account of the Smol next to an Xbox Series X, and the Smol is slightly smaller. So, for scale, we're all talking about how big the consoles are. The Xbox Series X is slightly bigger than a Smol. So there you go. But yeah, that was the kind of idea, the philosophy behind the Smol. And also from a design, like an aesthetic standpoint, I wanted them to be cute, but not in that kind of enforced Disney way of cute. I wanted them to be maybe a little creepy, like slightly. I think the bead eyes are a little insectoid, and I wanted them to be that kind of creepy Tim Burton-y cute, you know. And I think I've got there. They're a little cuter, like conventionally cute than I was kind of aiming for. I wanted them to be a bit creepier than what they ended up, but it is what it is. Sometimes a design will it will tell you what it wants to be. Ah, the chill beats. Yeah, I don't think Jimmy would do good with a yarn ball. Jimmy has a habit. Let's make puppets and talk about a cat. He has a habit of gets a bit chewy sometimes. Like, he's got anxiety, so he'll chew stuff. Sometimes electronic stuff. We have to put like bitter apple spray and stuff on power cables just to make sure he doesn't, chew through a power cable. Of which there are a lot around here. I have a lot of electronic equipment around, so got to keep an eye on him. But I watched him once. He was playing with a catnip mouse, and the catnip mouse had a yarn tail. And I watched him bite off and swallow the yarn tail. It thankfully emerged later without doing any damage. But since then, we try and be careful with giving him things that have like stringy bits on them, because he'll eat them. He's sometimes unclear about what food is. Okay, we're rounding up to the end of this thread, at least. So, I mean, it's not terrible. You can see, though, it's a time-consuming process. This is where the labor hours come in. Like I was talking about last stream, professionally made puppets can be expensive. And generally speaking, they should be, because there's a lot of labor that goes into them. So the fabric and the foam and things like that aren't terribly expensive. Like, for example, it's a little more expensive for me being in Canada for the fabric, because the one major supplier for nylon fleece that is already dyed is Puppet Pelts, and I love Puppet Pelts. Lori and Cindy are amazing. Probably the single best customer experience I've ever had is with Puppet Pelts. Love them to pieces. But so it's not cheap. It is in Canadian dollars. It's about, for the nylon fleece, it's about $42 a yard, and that's still okay. Like, so a yard I can get 2 or 3 puppets out of, on average. Couple of greeblies and a small, that kind of thing. However, there's exchange rate, and then I often, and in fact most of the time, get hit with duty, because I'm importing it basically from the States, and that can almost double the cost. So although it's not monstrously expensive, it is still expensive enough that it has to factor into what I charge for the puppets. But the major cost of any handmade anything, much less puppets, but any handmade thing, is always going to be labor hours. The reason things from a factory are so cheap is because A, it's set up for mass production, and B, they don't pay people much, which is a problem. But handmade things, you're always going to pay a premium. And you should, because they're handmade. And that doesn't necessarily mean better quality, right? But it just means that somebody took the time, and people's time should be compensated for. The Canadian socialist is on his soapbox again. Just let the chill beats wash over you. So yeah, I've been building seriously. It's a kind of a long story. I did design and build puppets when I was a kid, like 13 to 14, and then I stopped. And then 2 years ago was when the kind of light bulb moment went on in my head about, oh, I need to work with puppets again. I didn't start seriously building, like taking courses and actually learning how to do it right. It was about 1.5 years ago that I've been doing the serious building thing for. I think the store has been open for just over 1 year. So yeah, not long. There are people who've been doing it way, way longer than I have. But I was fortunate enough that I was in a position to be able to, like, I had enough savings that I could get some materials and some tools and stuff. But also, I came into it at a time when there's a lot of resources available. Like, you can go on Adam Frutinger's YouTube channel and learn everything you need to know to start building good-looking puppets. Just there, it's off of his YouTube channel. And from there, I took BJ Geyer's courses, and that was the real kind of impetus to get into this seriously and start making these hopefully high quality puppets. But yeah, so it was 2 years is like since I did the Oracle, and then about 1.5 years since I really started seriously building. But I find I have a bit of an aptitude for it. There's things like I enjoy sewing. So that helps, right? I didn't know I enjoyed sewing until I started building puppets. I hadn't really used a sewing machine before I started doing this. I learned to use a sewing machine properly because I was building puppets. So, it's led to a lot of things. Like, I I've done lots of kind of creative maker stuff. I've done leather tooling. I used to make chainmail. I used to build model kits. I've done a lot of sort of related from a skill standpoint. And a lot of those skills have translated over, like, for making models and stuff. So working with epoxies and like a lot of the stuff that you do when you make anything, those skills will translate from one medium to another. So thankfully, I did have kind of a groundwork in that. But most of this is just all me watching stuff on the internet and figuring it out and seeing if I had an aptitude for it. And also figuring out, like, after you learn the right way, then you have to figure out your way. But the order of those things is important. Like, you can start thinking or you can conjecture how to do something, but you got to learn how it's done by other people first, and then apply kind of your own creativity into that. I can demonstrate that, an example of that, when I get to the mouth, because the way I sew the mouth plate in isn't the way you should sew a mouth plate in. But that's because I'm clumsy. So I had to figure out ways around my clumsiness, right? Although I probably won't be showing that on camera because we're going to end fairly soon. Yeah, we're almost at the 2-hour mark here. 2 hours of watching me sew and babble. Good stream, Kevin. I'm kidding. Point, again, of this is that I'm just doing my job and happen to point a camera in my direction. I think this is a good time to start this kind of stream because, like, so many of us are stuck at home now because of COVID, of course. It's probably nice for people to have just hanging out with your puppet building friend, right? I'm guessing. I'm hoping that's what it's going to be. That's my intention. No, it's because I'm so incredibly photogenic. I'm glad you're enjoying it. I'm enjoying it too. Like I said before, I usually just end up talking to myself. This is one of the ways, if you haven't noticed, I practice my character voices. So I'll just be in character occasionally, commenting on what I'm doing. For my wife, sort of working from home because of lockdown, I would just go around and do my household chores in character. So, our neighbors, we live in an apartment building, so our neighbors would be hearing, I gotta get the vacuum out, and now look at the cats tossed a thing over here. Now I gotta pick this up too. So, who knows what they thought? But I mean, if you can't have fun living next to Frankie, how can you have fun? That's something I got to get going, is I want to do Frankie Play live streams now that I've got this brand new Xbox. I think it would be an opportune moment, and I've started playing and really enjoying Deep Rock Galactic, and I think that would be hilarious if I could get Frankie and maybe a couple of friends sort of play off of. We'll do Frankie Play live stream of Deep Rock Galactic. I think that's what's in my head for the next game stream. And I think that would be a lot of fun. Where are we here? So we are at the 2-hour mark. So tell you what, let's close it off here. I'm going to finish this today. I'm also going to sew in the mouth plate today. I'm going to do all that off camera. And then when we come back on Friday, what is today? Today is Wednesday. So when we come back on Friday, it'll be action-packed. We'll be assembling the whole thing. We'll be making the arms. We'll be putting the eyes and the hair in, and we'll be finishing the puppet on Friday. So, thank you, Piewackets, for hanging out. It's been a pleasure. And I'm just going to get on with the sewing, and we will hopefully See you on Friday. Where is my button for the thing? Here we go. All right. Bye-bye.